Dog raised abandoned lion cubs, but 2 years later something shocking happened. In a remote wildlife sanctuary called the White Lion, something extraordinary took place. A young lioness named Sirona gave birth to 2 beautiful lion cubs, one male and one female. The caretakers were thrilled, hoping that this birth was a sign of her successful adaptation to her new environment. But within hours, they realized something was terribly wrong. Sirona showed no interest in her cubs. She ignored their whimpers and didn't even clean them, a deeply troubling sign. The sanctuary staff watched with growing concern. They knew that in the wild, a lioness cares for her cubs around the clock in the first few days. But Sirona, who had once been rescued from the wilderness, had never learned how to be a mother. She was confused, overwhelmed, and eventually, she abandoned the cubs entirely. For 3 long days, the caretakers waited, hoping that her instincts would eventually kick in. But the tiny cubs grew weaker. They weren't nursing, shivered from the cold, and barely had the strength to move. A desperate rescue mission. On the 4th day, the veterinarians had no choice but to intervene. They carefully removed the starving and freezing cubs from the enclosure and rushed them to the quarantine station. The tiny predators were barely able to cry, their bellies sunken, their bones visible beneath their thin fur. In a desperate attempt to save them, the team began feeding them a special milk formula from a bottle. Every hour was a battle for their survival. But even if the team managed to stabilize them, there was still a major problem. Without a mother to care for them, they would never develop the strength they needed to survive as true lions. Days passed, and though the cubs gained weight thanks to artificial feeding, the veterinarians knew they couldn't just raise them in a cage. They needed a mother, one who would care for them, keep them warm, and treat them like her own offspring. But such a solution seemed impossible. Who would take on the cubs? A desperate search for a substitute mother began, and soon the team found an answer no one could have predicted. The sanctuary team was desperately searching for a solution. The lion cubs urgently needed a surrogate mother. Artificial feeding alone was not enough. They needed physical contact, warmth, and social imprinting to develop properly. Time was running out. Finally, someone had a bold idea. Shiva, an 8-year-old German shepherd who had recently given birth to her own puppies. She still had plenty of milk and was known for her gentle nature. But no one could predict how she would react to 2 foreign predators. Would she accept the tiny lions as her own? A risky experiment. As Shiva was led into the quarantine room, the caretakers watched her every move with bated breath. The dog curiously sniffed the tiny, shivering lion cubs lying in front of her. For a moment she seemed to hesitate, but then she slowly lay down and allowed them to nurse from her belly. It was an unbelievable moment. Shiva had accepted the lion cubs as her own. From that day on, she cared for them, warmed them with her body, and groomed them as if they were her own puppies. The connection between them was immediate and undeniable. With each passing day, the lion cubs grew stronger under Shiva's care. They playfully pawed at her ears, snuggled against her belly, and followed her every step. Shiva treated them no differently than her own puppies, even going so far as to defend them if anyone approached their enclosure. The sanctuary staff could hardly believe their eyes, a dog raising 2 lions as if they were her own. But no one could have predicted that this incredible bond would one day be put to the ultimate test. Months passed, and the once tiny, helpless lion cubs grew into strong, powerful juveniles. Their playful wrestling matches became more intense, their teeth grew sharper, and they began exhibiting instinctive predator behaviors. Shiva, the patient and loving German shepherd, continued to care for them, but it was becoming increasingly clear that her time as their surrogate mother was coming to an end. The caretakers knew that at some point, the lions needed to learn how to behave like real predators. They made the difficult decision to move them to a larger enclosure where they could develop without human or animal influence. The heartbreaking goodbye. The day of separation was incredibly emotional. Shiva sat in front of the enclosure, watching as her 2 children were led into their new home. By now, the lions were almost twice her size, Yet as they pressed themselves against the fence, they let out soft whimpers, as if they instinctively knew something was different. Shiva lowered her head onto her paws and watched them with her ever-watchful eyes, following them until they disappeared from sight. The caretakers were deeply moved by this moment. She had raised them as her own, and now she had to let them go, a bond that couldn't be broken. Without Shiva as their constant presence, the lions began developing their natural instincts more strongly. They learned how to hunt prey, assert dominance within their group, and behave like true predators. Yet despite adapting to their new environment, something still seemed to be missing. Every time they heard a distant dog barking, their ears perked up, and they seemed to pause, as if an old memory had been awakened. No one could have imagined that this deep emotional bond would play a crucial role even 2 years later. 2 years had passed since Shiva had last seen her lion cubs. The once small, clumsy babies had grown into majestic, powerful predators. Their manes had begun to sprout, their muscles were strong, and they moved with the grace and dominance of true wild lions. No one at the sanctuary was sure whether they would still remember their surrogate mother. But when the invitation came for Shiva to return to the reserve, her owner decided to give her the chance to see her children one last time. An unforgettable reunion. As Shiva stood before the large enclosure, her sharp eyes scanning the area, everyone held their breath. The 2 lions lifted their heads, their gaze fixing on the familiar figure standing at the fence. For a moment, nothing happened. But then, the unthinkable occurred. The enormous predators charged forward, sprinting straight toward Shiva. The caretakers froze in fear, worried that the lions' natural instincts had overshadowed their memories. But then, something incredible happened. The lions suddenly skidded to a stop, dropped to the ground, and began nuzzling against Shiva, just like they had as cubs. They rubbed their massive heads against her, licked her face, and purred softly, a sign of deep affection and respect. A love beyond species. For the caretakers, this was proof that true bonds know no boundaries. Shiva wagged her tail excitedly, playfully jumped around her lions, and barked with pure joy, as if they had never been apart. Even the most experienced caretakers were left in awe by this deeply emotional reunion. It was a moment that proved love, care, and family are not defined by species. Shiva had once saved them, and in their hearts, she would forever be their mother. This story shows that true love knows no limits. Shiva not only raised the lion cubs, but gave them the mother they never would have had. Even after 2 years, they had never forgotten her. A powerful testament to the depth of love and connection beyond mere instinct. This emotional reunion touched not only the hearts of the caretakers, but also proved that family is more than just blood. It is a bond that lasts forever. Did this touching story move you? Leave a like and share it with your friends. What do you think? Can animals truly remember special humans or other animals for a lifetime? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another incredible animal story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.